The house smelled faintly of roasted chicken and old carpet, a mix I'd grown accustomed to over the years but couldn't quite reconcile with the tension in the air tonight. It was a rare family dinner. My parents had insisted we all come together, though the distance in the months since my divorce lingered like an unwelcome guest. I sat at the end of the table trying to make small talk with my older sister, but her smirk and whispered comments betrayed the discomfort that rippled through the room. Every glance seemed sharpened with anticipation, and I could feel it in my chest. Something was about to happen. My ex-wife was late, as if her arrival were its own performance, and I braced myself for whatever drama she intended to unfold. I recalled the advice from my therapist. Breathe, hold your ground, don't react immediately. I reminded myself to stay composed, though the knot in my stomach suggested it would take all my self-control. Every second felt stretched, every tick of the clock a countdown to humiliation I wasn't prepared to endure. Then, just as the conversation had stalled into awkward silences, the front door opened. She stepped in, dressed in a way that announced power without words. My ex-wife's presence was magnetic, almost theatrical, but it was the man at her side that stole my breath. Young, confident, and with an unmistakable French accent, he took her arm like it belonged to him, and my stomach dropped. No one had mentioned he'd be here, not a whisper. The room stiffened, my mother's eyes darting nervously, siblings exchanging barely concealed grins. She introduced him casually, as though presenting a trophy from some victorious conquest, and casually boasted about their romantic escape in Paris. Pride wrestled with shame inside me. I forced a smile, held my tongue, and prayed for a pause in this ongoing spectacle. Their laughter and easy intimacy made my chest tighten, each glance and gesture amplifying my humiliation. I wanted to say something, anything, to reclaim a shred of dignity, but I remembered the advice: observe, calculate, respond with precision. The night wasn't over, and I could feel this was only the first act of a much larger performance. Dinner began, though the air was thick with unspoken tension. I caught the subtle glances between my ex and my older brother, those flickers of recognition that spoke louder than words. Memories flickered unbidden. A late-night phone call months ago, hushed and dismissed by me at the time, now ringing loudly in my mind. They had coordinated this. I realized I had been played again, not just by her, but by those I trusted, those I called family. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. My pride burned as I fought to maintain a veneer of calm, but the storm inside me was relentless. Excusing myself quietly, I slipped away from the table, every step toward the bathroom a battle with the swelling fury. Alone, I let the quiet absorb me, each heartbeat a reminder of my position, the youngest, the one overlooked, the one whose sacrifices seemed invisible. In the solitude of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of who I used to be, the weight of years of patience and restraint settled heavy on my shoulders. Holidays spent in the background, events missed or ignored, all of it painted a picture of invisibility that stretched long into my adulthood. I replayed memories of standing silent as others claimed attention, wondering if my quiet endurance had only made me easier to dismiss. The mirror reflected a man I scarcely recognized, his eyes questioning, daring, silently demanding. When did I stop fighting for myself? My fists clenched briefly at the thought, not in rage, but in determination. I could feel the spark of resolve flicker to life, a quiet promise to myself that this pattern could end tonight, though I had yet to see how. A knock on the door pulled me from my reverie. My father's face was solemn, hands holding a plain envelope with careful deliberation. "Your mother wanted you to read this tonight, alone," he said, voice low but weighted. My fingers hesitated on the seal, heart hammering, mind racing through possibilities I wasn't ready to confront. Sliding the envelope open, the handwriting struck me immediately, her familiar scrawl, precise and deliberate. I could feel the gravity before even unfolding the paper, a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope, as my eyes traced the words that would change everything yet again. The room was quiet, almost oppressively so, except for the steady tick of the wall clock, each second a reminder that time waited for no one. I sat cross-legged on my old bed, the envelope from my mother cradled in my hands, hesitating before breaking the seal. My father's words echoed in my mind, "Read it alone, tonight." There was a weight in them, a kind of authority that made the envelope feel heavier than paper and ink deserved. Slowly, I unfolded the letter, tracing her familiar handwriting with a careful fingertip. The lines at first were warm, apologetic, tinged with regret for never speaking up for me or defending me against favoritism. She acknowledged the years I spent invisible, the subtle wounds inflicted by being the youngest, by having my voice drowned out by louder, more assertive siblings. I could almost hear her voice, trembling slightly from illness, yet firm in the way she had always been when she needed to be. Then I reached the latter half of the letter, and the words struck me like a silent thunderclap. She revealed a secret clause in her will, one that gave me control over a family property, a downtown commercial building, exclusively. The clause would activate 90 days after her passing, and tomorrow marked that very day. She explained her reasoning simply. I had never asked for anything, never demanded more than what was fair, so she left me the one thing that truly mattered. There was a warning, too, about the inevitable resentment and challenges from the family, and a note that my ex-wife could be indirectly affected. "You'll be hated for this, but finally seen," she wrote. My hands trembled slightly as I absorbed the significance of it, realizing that what seemed like a simple piece of paper held power capable of shaking the family to its core. Memories from the dinner came unbidden. Elowen's new companion had mentioned casually that he was scouting property opportunities in the States, and now it all clicked. That building, the one she had kept secret in the letter, was on the same street he had referenced without thinking. A chill ran down my spine. Had Elowen known about the clause all along? Was the Paris trip, the public flaunting, the orchestrated presence of her lover at dinner, all part of a larger, calculated game to probe my reaction, or even manipulate the situation? The thought unsettled me profoundly, shifting the narrative of betrayal from mere personal humiliation to something strategic, almost chess-like in its intent. Sitting there, alone in the dark, the initial shock and hurt began to crystallize into determination. I reviewed everything, the glances between her and my brother, the casual air of control she had wielded at dinner, the smirk of my older siblings, as though they'd long been privy to some private joke at my expense. They underestimated me. Again, I muttered aloud, folding the letter carefully and setting it aside. This wasn't about immediate confrontation or petty revenge. It was about understanding, strategy, and precision. I had to act with patience, to move deliberately, ensuring that each step I took was backed by fact and timing, not emotion alone. I could feel the fog of humiliation lifting slightly, replaced by a focus I hadn't allowed myself to indulge in for years. Finally, I placed the letter into a protective envelope, the kind meant for safekeeping, and reached for my old rotary phone. My fingers dialed slowly, deliberately, each click of the rotary a countdown of its own. When the line picked up, my voice was steady, though under the surface, anticipation simmered. "Hey, it's me. I need to talk." "You remember what we discussed about Mom's building?" There was a pause on the other end, a weighty silence that carried its own tension, before a voice responded sharply, "You're already being watched." I walked into the family business headquarters mid-morning, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The staff stiffened as I entered, their hushed conversations dying mid-word. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I caught it all. The sideways glances, the faint tension in the air. The office carried decades of legacy, from the gleaming wood panels to the family portraits lining the walls, each image a reminder of expectations and unspoken rules. I scanned the room carefully, seeking out my siblings and the occasional familiar face of former in-laws. My mind flicked back to my mother's letter and the clause that had shifted everything. The weight of it pressed down on me as I settled into my seat, notebook open, hands poised to record, eyes attentive to every subtle expression. A quiet tension built as I observed, waiting for the right moment to understand what was truly going on. The meeting began, and a casual remark from my brother about dividing things fairly caught my attention. It was an innocuous comment to most, but to me, it was the first crack in the facade. They had already discussed the will, plotting in secret while I remained unaware. I could see it now in the small exchanges of glances, the brief nods, an unspoken alliance forming against me. Anger flashed, but I tempered it with calculation. Every word, every reaction had to be measured. I jotted down notes discreetly, cataloging potential weaknesses in their arguments, the slight overconfidence in their tone, a telling sign of vulnerability. They thought they had the upper hand, but I had the advantage of information and focus. Then, the screen flickered to life. My ex-wife's lover appeared on the video call, his smooth demeanor hiding a sharp, calculating intent. He spoke casually about the same commercial property that my mother had left to me, pretending ignorance while subtly probing for reactions. My pulse quickened, not from fear but from recognition. This was manipulation, a test of boundaries, an attempt to intimidate. My mind went through scenarios rapidly, how to respond, how to assert control without showing the slightest weakness, anger mixed with resolve, sharpening my focus. Every word I would utter had to carry weight, every pause a measured moment. The balance of power began to shift slightly in my favor as I processed evidence mentally, laying groundwork for what would come next. I consciously lowered my voice, each phrase chosen carefully to assert authority without aggression. Mentally, I mapped out potential outcomes, the legal skirmishes ahead, the backlash from family, the inevitable whispers and social embarrassment. My strategy was no longer reactionary, it was about leverage. I could turn their overconfidence into an asset for my own planning, and patience, observation, and calm would be my strongest weapons. I felt the tension within me settle, replaced by a precise determination, a readiness to play the long game. The boardroom, with all its legacy and unspoken rules, became my chessboard. As the call ended, the boardroom door clicked shut behind me. The residual tension hung in the air like a heavy curtain, reminding me that the game had only just begun. I picked up my phone, fingers steady, and typed a message to a trusted contact. "They're moving faster than expected, but meet me tonight." My heart beat steadily, anticipation and strategy intertwining as I prepared for what the shadows might reveal. The grand ballroom shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, each reflection catching the shimmer of silk gowns and polished suits. I stepped inside, letting my eyes sweep across the familiar faces, cousins, aunts, uncles, former colleagues, catching the flicker of curiosity, subtle judgment, and concealed alliances in their expressions. The air smelled of rich perfumes and polished wood, a faint hum of conversation and laughter weaving through the background music. I carried myself with calm authority, my posture deliberate, my movements measured, each gesture sending a quiet message that I was here, aware, and unshakable. Thoughts of my mother's letter and the secret clause in her will swirled in my mind, sharpening my focus. I anticipated the subtle confrontations to come, mentally mapping the room, noting who might try to undermine me, who might betray a glance, who might align with my interests. Every step, every glance I made was intentional, a preparation for the evening's intricate dance of family politics. Early in the gala, a cousin's voice, light and casual, drifted over to me, a pointed comment questioning my ability to manage the inheritance, a subtle dig meant to erode my credibility. Guests nearby exchanged polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, whispers barely contained, as if expecting a reaction. Frustration welled up, but I held it steady, my lips pressed into a controlled line. My gaze flicked to the slideshow highlighting family achievements, my contributions glaringly absent, erased in the soft glow of the projector. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate slight, a calculated move to weaken my authority. I tucked the irritation away, my mind already turning it into leverage, planning for the right moment to expose the oversight without losing control. Every gesture, every controlled breath reinforced my strategic advantage. Emotional restraint became my shield, my silent weapon, as I prepared for the shifts yet to come. In the midst of the chatter, a younger cousin sidled up, voice barely audible above the music. They offered a hint, a whisper about hidden documents concerning my mother's will, their eyes betraying knowledge and understanding of the injustice I faced. I absorbed the information quietly, exchanging a brief coded conversation that promised coordination without exposure. The revelation sparked a flicker of hope amidst the tension, a subtle shift from frustration to empowerment. I began envisioning a plan, considering how to restore recognition and assert authority without overt aggression, to use the gala's public setting to highlight my legitimacy while remaining composed. Observation, patience, and subtle influence became the tools of the night, each move calculated, each interaction a thread in a larger strategy. I focused intently on maintaining composure, carefully controlling tone, gestures, and expressions. I mentally rehearsed responses to potential provocations from family members and former in-laws, cataloging every detail for later advantage. Observation became paramount, reaction secondary, as I mapped out long-term outcomes and potential gains. The evening's atmosphere, thick with anticipation and unspoken challenges, sharpened my focus and heightened my awareness. By the time I felt ready to act, a quiet, deliberate confidence had replaced the earlier tension, a subtle empowerment coursing beneath the surface, guiding my decisions and movements with precision. As the gala swelled with conversation and music, I noticed a critical family document casually placed on a side table, almost hidden in plain sight. My heart quickened, anticipation coursing through me as I edged closer, carefully balancing visibility with subtlety. The stakes were high, the potential for exposure tangible, yet the moment was ripe with opportunity. My mind raced through possibilities, the night stretching ahead with calculated promise. The weight of the evening's interactions and the knowledge of allies and enemies alike settled into a focused, controlled determination. The study room was quiet, the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the spaces between my thoughts. I noticed an envelope tucked beneath a stack of legal folders, slightly misfiled, almost hidden from view. My pulse quickened as I carefully retrieved it, recognizing the familiar handwriting of my mother. Inside was an addendum to her will, a clause none of my siblings seemed to have noticed. As I unfolded the paper, a wave of shock swept through me. There it was, plain and deliberate, a significant inheritance and authority granted solely to me. The magnitude of it sank in, mingling with a surge of vindication and anxiety, knowing the reactions this revelation would provoke. My mind flashed through past years of overlooked contributions, unacknowledged sacrifices, moments where I'd been dismissed, and now, with this document, I held undeniable leverage. I glanced around the study, ensuring no one was within earshot, my eyes scanning for potential eavesdroppers. The room seemed to shrink, every shadow a reminder that timing and strategy would be everything. I settled into a chair, unfolding possibilities in my mind, thinking through how to confront my family without appearing aggressive. Each potential ally and adversary from the gala replayed in my thoughts, their habits, tendencies, and subtle expressions I'd cataloged over the years. Anger bubbled briefly beneath the surface, tempered by careful reasoning. I knew that a hasty confrontation could undo all the advantage this revelation offered. Visualizing different scenarios, I imagined dialogues, timed revelations, and subtle displays of evidence that could shift perceptions in my favor. Humor and self-talk became my anchor, steadying my nerves, reminding me that patience and poise were my strongest weapons. Each strategy was meticulously layered, balancing the gratification of exposing the truth with the tactical advantage of measured action. Then another layer of betrayal revealed itself. One of my siblings, the one I'd least suspected, was secretly colluding with my ex-wife's new partner, plotting to undermine my claim to the inheritance. Shock hit me first, then the familiar tightening in my chest, yet outwardly I remained composed. I observed the sibling, noting their cautious movements, the subtle way they glanced around to ensure no one was watching, the half-smile of hidden confidence. My mind immediately mapped counter-strategies, timing, witness placement, and subtle gestures that could expose their duplicity without losing control. I began outlining a soft reveal, designed to maximize the embarrassment of the betrayer while preserving my own composure and authority. Every gesture, every pause in my observation became deliberate, part of a carefully calculated response. Breathing steadily, I focused on internal dialogue and mental cues to maintain calm amidst the growing chaos. Each conversation, each subtle facial expression, each gesture from family members became data, shaping the strategy I would employ. Emotional cues indicated who might align with me, who might oppose, and who would hesitate. Patience, observation, and clever timing replaced immediate confrontation, reinforcing my quiet empowerment. I felt a subtle shift within, a determination crystallizing into unshakable resolve. This was my turning point. No longer would I allow myself to be dismissed or underestimated. The room was a chessboard, and I was ready to make the first precise, decisive move. From the corner of my eye, I spotted the betraying sibling attempting to discreetly tuck away incriminating documents. My heart raced, a familiar mix of anticipation and resolve sharpening every nerve. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the opportunity to assert control, to transform years of subtle injustice into tangible leverage. Every instinct screamed focus, every thought mapped action. It was now or never, and I was ready. The private lounge was dimly lit, a soft amber glow reflecting off the polished wood panels. I sank into a leather armchair, replaying the siblings' betrayal over and over in my mind. Each detail, the subtle smiles, the whispered comments, the way they tried to hide evidence, was logged in my mental archive. I acknowledged past strategic errors, moments where impatience or pride had cost me an advantage, and resolved not to repeat them. Objectives crystallized: protect my inheritance, expose manipulation without losing composure, and maintain the upper hand. My eyes scanned the room, noting who moved where, who lingered too long near sensitive files, who glanced at me with thinly veiled curiosity. I began drafting silent tactics, small moves designed to reclaim authority without appearing confrontational. Allies were quietly confirmed. A few loyal staff and family friends whose discretion I trusted implicitly. Every element was accounted for, every potential ripple measured. I initiated the first subtle maneuvers, repositioning critical documents and sending discreet reminders to witnesses who could confirm my side. The tension was almost imperceptible but tangible, a delicate shift in the family's atmosphere. I hinted at awareness of deception through casual remarks, controlled expressions, and measured glances, knowing the betrayer would notice and react. Psychological insight guided each move. I could almost feel the shift in the siblings' composure, the subtle nervousness behind the practiced mask. Conversations paused briefly. Small gestures became loaded with meaning, and alliances began to tilt quietly in my favor. I maintained an exterior of calm, while inside, determination and quiet triumph surged. Each response I observed was data, shaping the timing and sequence of the next move. With precision, I turned the tables. Hidden documents were leveraged to create indisputable proof of my rightful claim, and I arranged for a private reveal to select family members and legal advisors. Anticipating attempts to discredit me, I preemptively neutralized potential objections, using measured language to assert authority and clarify past contributions. The expressions I encountered, shock, disbelief, grudging respect, were small victories, each confirming the effectiveness of patience and observation. Confidence grew steadily. The realization that strategic patience yielded tangible results was empowering. I had become the silent architect of control, using intellect and foresight rather than aggression to reshape the playing field. Emotional mastery was crucial as the situation escalated. I exercised restraint, noting each subtle movement, each fleeting expression, each whispered exchange. Emotional satisfaction was balanced against tactical foresight. Impatience or overreaction could unravel everything. Mentally, I rehearsed follow-up moves, anticipating both public and legal confrontations. Inner dialogue reinforced intelligence, strategic patience, and moral high ground. This quiet empowerment became a shield. While others reacted impulsively, I remained decisive, observing and guiding outcomes with deliberate calm. Then, a message arrived unexpectedly. My eyes widened as I read the words. A previously unknown witness had critical information that could shift the balance entirely. My heart quickened, not with panic, but with calculated anticipation. Every instinct told me this was the moment to act decisively, integrating this new piece of the puzzle into the broader strategy I had been constructing. The stakes had risen, and the game was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt truly in command. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of my private office, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. I sat back, reviewing every maneuver I had executed so far, replaying each moment with surgical precision. The counterattacks had worked in subtle ways, but I could see the remaining gaps, moments where my adversaries could still exploit ignorance or impatience. I consolidated the evidence in my mind: conversations, hidden documents, ally observations, and the faint cues of doubt in my opponent's body language. Each detail reinforced the need for a calm, non-reactive approach. Patience had been my ally, and now it demanded vigilance. I noticed subtle changes in family dynamics: the slight hesitation in a cousin's step, a longer pause from my brother during a discussion, signals that an opening was near. My resolve strengthened. The time to pivot strategically was approaching, and I would act decisively when the moment arrived. I arranged discreet meetings with key witnesses and trusted advisors, carefully orchestrating each interaction. Subtle cues were planted to unsettle those plotting against me, A casually mentioned detail here, a pointed question there. Every meeting was documented mentally, organized meticulously for potential legal or public leverage. I balanced assertiveness with measured composure, ensuring that no one could accuse me of hostility while conveying unmistakable control. Watching their reactions was instructive. Slight unease, micro-expressions of doubt, tentative glances exchanged behind hands. Each reaction an indicator of shifting power. I rehearsed outcomes in my head, multiple scenarios unfolding like chess moves, each designed to maximize strategic impact without revealing all my cards at once. The office felt charged, quiet tension vibrating through the air, as if the walls themselves held their breath in anticipation. Later, at a minor family gathering in the adjacent garden, I tested the waters publicly. Carefully timed references to past injustices, casual yet pointed, drew attention. I watched faces as information landed, subtle gasps, surprised glances, hushed murmurs spreading across small clusters of relatives and associates. Satisfaction rippled through me, tempered by discipline. I noted reactions, calibrated responses, and controlled any outward expression of triumph. Credibility and authority began to solidify in the eyes of witnesses. The whispered recognition that I had been wronged and that I possessed the evidence to prove it shifted dynamics subtly but decisively. Even those previously aligned with my adversaries glanced in my direction with reconsideration. The initial public shift was small but undeniable, setting the stage for future maneuvers. I focused inward, maintaining calm while observing each subtle change. I acknowledged the small victories quietly, internalizing the empowerment rather than broadcasting it. Emotional restraint was my shield, allowing opponents to overextend themselves while I measured each reaction. My mental strategy remained clear: control emotions, act decisively when the timing was perfect. I noted minor lapses in judgment among adversaries, recording these for future leverage. Each observation reinforced my internal conviction. Patience amplified influence and authority. The sense of calculated empowerment became almost tactile, a quiet strength that allowed me to navigate the social battlefield without appearing reactive, preserving my advantage for when confrontation became unavoidable. Then a confidential message arrived, flickering on my phone screen. My pulse quickened with controlled anticipation as I read the words. A hidden document, previously unknown, could redefine my leverage entirely. The timing was impeccable. This piece of the puzzle promised to shift the balance irreversibly. I took a deep breath, steadying my resolve. Every step I had taken, every moment of strategic patience, had led to this. The final confrontation was drawing near, and now, armed with this revelation, I felt both empowered and focused. The pivot was no longer theoretical, it was underway, and nothing would catch me off guard. Evening had fallen over the family estate, casting long shadows across the manicured gardens and the stately mansion. I reviewed every piece of evidence, every statement from witnesses, rehearsing the sequence of disclosures in my mind. Each step had to land precisely, leaving no room for doubt or misinterpretation. Allies were in place, each aware of their role in the upcoming confrontation. My heart beat steadily, the calm before the storm, as I observed subtle signs of anxiety and overconfidence among my adversaries. Their body language betrayed them. A twitch here, a glance there, and I knew the moment to act was near. I reminded myself to maintain emotional control, to balance assertiveness with composure, and to let strategy, not anger, dictate my moves. Everything had led to this point, and I would not falter. The controlled public meeting began in the private study with key family members present. I introduced the evidence carefully, each revelation deliberate and precise. Documents were laid out, conversations recounted, inconsistencies highlighted with calm clarity. Eyes widened, lips pressed into thin lines. Shock rippled through the room as my adversaries processed the implications. Denial and panic surfaced in subtle expressions. An eyebrow raised, a hand clenching, a sideways glance. I maintained firmness without aggression, letting the facts speak for themselves. Every word was measured, every pause intentional. The balance of power shifted in real time, my credibility solidifying as I revealed the hypocrisy and mismanagement that had previously gone unchallenged. By the end, silence had fallen, pregnant with anticipation, the room waiting for someone to respond. As expected, attempts to discredit me followed almost immediately. False claims and diversion tactics surfaced, but I anticipated each move. My prearranged documentation neutralized every accusation. The cracks in my adversary's authority became visible, subtle, yet undeniable. Their composure faltered under scrutiny, and whispers of doubt spread among family members. I timed each disclosure carefully, controlling the narrative with precision. Satisfaction coursed through me quietly, a recognition of the effectiveness of strategy over reaction. Every counterplay was executed with measured poise, preserving authority and emotional balance, leaving no opening for impulsive retaliation. I remained centered, letting my careful orchestration dictate the outcome. Finally, the power shift became undeniable. Allies nodded subtly, confirming the moral and strategic victory. Adversaries showed vulnerability and regret. Their attempts to regain control seemed futile against the meticulous groundwork I had laid. I asserted my authority quietly but unmistakably, my position solidified within both family and social hierarchies. Integrity remained intact even as victory was claimed. The room's atmosphere had transformed. Respect replaced skepticism, acknowledgement replaced dismissal. Every calculated move had contributed to this moment, and I felt the weight of strategic patience bearing fruit. Even as I took stock of the situation, I remained alert, knowing there could still be hidden challenges lurking, waiting for an opening. A subtle message flickered on my phone screen, hinting at a remaining document or witness I had yet to account for. My pulse quickened with a controlled intensity. The confrontation had succeeded, yet shadows of the past lingered, threatening to resurface if vigilance faltered. I read the message again, reaffirming that the final pieces were still in play. The triumph was real, but the story was not entirely concluded. My mind raced, planning the next steps, maintaining the edge that had carried me this far. The night had delivered its victory, yet the war for full resolution remained just ahead. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows of the family estate, casting long shadows across the familiar halls that had witnessed years of tension, triumph, and betrayal. I walked slowly, revisiting the key moments in my mind, the subtle manipulations, the calculated missteps, and the victories earned through patience and strategy. Each memory carried its own weight: anger at deceit, sadness for lost trust, but also pride in the clarity I had gained. Observing my family from a distance, I noticed lingering unease in their posture and expressions. Some seemed humbled, others resentful, yet all were witnesses to a subtle shift in dynamics. I reflected on my own growth, the strength carved out of adversity, and the lessons learned about patience, foresight, and the quiet power of restraint. Emotional reconciliation with myself became as important as any legal or social triumph, preparing me for closure in the next chapter of my life. Late that morning, a final revelation arrived unexpectedly, a discreet envelope tucked in a desk drawer containing an overlooked clause from my mother's will. The note within clarified motives and hidden actions of adversaries, exposing intentions that had been carefully masked until now. I studied it with calm deliberation, integrating the information seamlessly into my ongoing strategy. There was no shock or frantic reaction, only measured understanding and satisfaction. This last piece of the puzzle confirmed the moral victory already won while maintaining dignity and composure. The document revealed a level of foresight from my mother I had not fully appreciated, and in its quiet way, it offered a sense of closure. The story of betrayal, manipulation, and subtle deception was complete, and I had navigated it successfully, demonstrating intelligence, patience, and restraint. By afternoon, I turned my attention to repairing family and social ties. Conversations were initiated with those who had shown loyalty, clarifying misunderstandings and extending acknowledgement where it was deserved. I balanced firmness with grace, asserting rightful ownership, respect, and recognition in both public and private settings. Legal and social outcomes were now clear. Those who had acted against me faced consequences proportionate to their actions, yet the atmosphere allowed space for reconciliation. I guided younger family members, emphasizing principles learned through the conflict, offering mentorship as a moral anchor. Slowly, trust was rebuilt in places where doubt had lingered, and the subtle tension that had colored interactions began to dissipate. Closure was not only about authority reclaimed, but about shaping relationships with wisdom and integrity. As the day progressed, I reflected on the personal journey I had traveled. Confidence had returned, grounded in the knowledge that resilience and strategic thinking could overcome even the most insidious challenges. Hope emerged as a guiding principle, an awareness that the future was mine to influence without being shackled by past betrayals. I acknowledged the minor, unresolved nuances, questions that might surface later, but they no longer carried the power to unsettle me. Emotional equilibrium and foresight had become habitual, and I embraced the promise of continued growth, strengthened by the trials endured. My inner monologue carried the satisfaction of justice served, tempered with the understanding that life, like strategy, required patience and vigilance. Yet even in this resolution, a lingering question hovered, a small, subtle reminder that the past's shadow, though confronted, could always resurface in unexpected ways. As I stood by the window observing the estate bathed in late afternoon light, I recognized that life moves forward with lessons remembered and strength renewed. The victories, the reconciliations, and the personal growth had created a foundation from which I could act with clarity, compassion, and authority. The chapter of conflict had ended, but the story of life and family continued, promising new challenges met with wisdom and resolve. The past had been confronted, the present asserted, and the future held in confident hands.